We are looking live at a Falcon 9 rocket on the launch pad at the Cape Canaveral Air Force Station in Florida. At 11:50 tonight, the aerospace company SpaceX will launch a Dragon cargo spacecraft on a NASA mission to resupply the International Space Station. Happy Friday evening, everyone, and welcome to NASA's John F. Kennedy Space Center for live launch coverage of SpaceX's Commercial Resupply Mission 20 for the International Space Station. What a fantastic way to start the weekend with smoke and fire. I'm your host, Tammy Long, and we are but 19 minutes away from the planned liftoff of a Falcon 9 rocket from the beautiful coast of Florida. This CRS-20 mission will fly much-needed astronaut supplies and research experiments up to the International Space Station, which at launch time will be orbiting 259 statute miles above our Earth. Back here on Earth, our team of correspondents are reporting from across the country to cover this thrilling launch. We'll head to the Mission Director Center here on the Space Coast for updates on the weather and the countdown. Then we'll head west to SpaceX headquarters in Hawthorne, California, and of course, we'll check in with Mission Control Houston at Johnson Space Center. So let's get fired up by reviewing some quick facts about tonight's CRS-20 mission launch. CRS-20 is the third flight of this Dragon spacecraft and the last commercial resupply mission to utilize the Dragon 1 vehicle. The spacecraft includes more than 4,500 pounds of astronaut supplies and payloads for science research. Tonight's launch window is instantaneous, meaning that SpaceX must launch at the exact second of the planned liftoff or try again on another day. As planned, the Dragon spacecraft stays docked to the International Space Station for about a month before returning to terra firma. Not only will CRS-20 resupply the ISS, it's also delivering important science experiments, some of which will impact directly humanity's quality of life. So let's take a deeper dive into the payloads. Bartolomeo is an external payload platform operating up to 12 active payload sites on the station. The Airbus platform hosts commercial and institutional payloads, offers unlimited opportunities for new space missions, and enables the growth of the commercial space marketplace. And next is a payload that seeks out of this world performance. That is Adidas Boost. The shoe and apparel giant is using space to test its tiny foam sphere technology to improve foot performance and comfort. CRS-20 also carries a droplet formation study. Delta Faucet is sending up an experiment that could help reduce water without sacrificing the performance of shower heads. And the MVP Cell 03 investigation is looking at helping your heart. It will look at stem cells that could treat cardiovascular disease or heart abnormalities caused by spaceflight. A little later, Patrick O'Neill is joining us live in studio with more details about the exciting research heading to station. Joining us now are NASA's Marie Lewis and Daryl Nail. They are live in the Mission Director Center just a few miles away from the launch pad. Hi, Marie. Hi, Daryl. What's the latest?
Hi, Tammy. I'm Marie Lewis and Daryl Nail here. Excuse me.
That's right.
A tongue twister for me. We've been monitoring the weather pretty closely and watching the rocket on the pad.
Yeah, the launch director just about a half hour ago gave the go for fueling up, and so right now we're about halfway filled with fuel at the out at the launch pad for the SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket. He gave that go ahead right around 11 p.m. This evening, and we are set, of course, for a liftoff at 11:50 and 31 seconds Eastern Time. We are T-minus 15 minutes and 54 seconds and counting. And so the rocket looking good here. Of course, they had to make some adjustments, Marie, in order to make this happen.
That's right. We were actually originally scheduled to go at the beginning of this week, but then during those pre-flight inspections, SpaceX found a valve motor on the second stage engine wasn't performing or wasn't behaving quite as expected. So in order to be on the safe side, they decided to just swap that out with another second stage that was already here on the Cape and ready for flight. So that's passed all pre-flight inspections. And so technically, we haven't had any showstoppers hoppers. It sounds like the real area of threat right now is the weather, right?
It really is, and that's something that they've been watching throughout the evening. And one of the particular areas of concerns is liftoff winds. And as you're looking at the picture there of the cargo Dragon, we want to move now to the satellite view of the weather. And as you can see off to the right-hand side of the screen, that's a cold front that pushed off to the east, and it brought in lower temperatures. But because it was a low-pressure system followed by a high-pressure system to the north, we have a gusty wind situation on the ground. We've been moving air about 25 to 30 miles per hour around the launch site. There is a small craft warning advisory in the area put out by the local weather service. So winds are going pretty good. It all sums up to this, though. We're looking right now at basically a probability of violation of 60% for CRS-20. The winds, as I mentioned, between 25 and 30 knots. The temperature has come down quite a bit, down to 56 degrees. But the big concern is that liftoff wind, and they're monitoring it. Earlier tonight, around sunset, it wasn't too bad, but it has gone up since then, and it continues to trend in that general direction. So we're pushing right up against the limit, but as of right now, we are okay. We are go for liftoff winds.
And we're just under 14 minutes now from liftoff. That instantaneous window, as a reminder, is at 11:50 and 31 seconds. Taking a look again at the pad, that cargo Dragon you see on the top is reusable. In fact, it's been flown 2 times before. The first was CRS-10. That was back in February 2017, and then the second flight of this particular Crew Dragon, you can see it on your screen there, was in December 2018. That was CRS-16. So those 2 previous flights, there you see those liftoffs side by side. So excited to see this third and final flight of this cargo Dragon. This is actually the last flight, not just of this particular capsule, but the final flight of the first version of the cargo Dragon. So big moment tonight if they're able to see liftoff here and the weather cooperates.
Yeah, and hopefully that will happen. But we will continue to monitor the situation. As you look at the rocket there, you can see about how much has been fueled to the liquid oxygen, because that's where you see that gaseous oxygen coming off the first stage. So far we're looking good, but of course we're going to continue to monitor the situation. Until then, though, we'll toss it back to the studio to Tammy.
Thanks, Marie and Daryl. We'll check back a little later. Right now, we are T-minus 12 minutes and counting. Let's check in with SpaceX headquarters in Hawthorne, California, where the Falcon 9 rocket and Crew Dragon were designed and built. Shiva Bharadwaj is joining us live. Hello, California. Tell us about the history of Dragon.
Yeah, thanks, Tammy. Now, today's mission is SpaceX's 5th launch of 2020, and it also marks the last flight of the first version of our Dragon vehicle, which we've been operating for 9 years now. Dragon made its debut in 2012 as the first private spacecraft in history to visit the International Space Station, and since then it's actually made 20 trips to and from the National Lab. Today, it's one of the few vehicles that can deliver significant cargo to the station and the only vehicle that can deliver cargo from it. Now, SpaceX is under contract with NASA for a total of 26 cargo resupply missions, and starting with CRS-21, we'll be flying an upgraded version of the Dragon spacecraft that'll also be capable of flying people. Both Falcon 9 and Dragon were designed with reflight in mind, and the hardware is built to support multiple missions with minimal refurbishment. And tonight's mission will actually be the 9th time that we've reflown a Dragon spacecraft, which is really awesome. Now, as Daryl and Marie had mentioned, this Dragon has been to the station twice before. A fun bit of trivia, this will be the 3rd time that a Dragon spacecraft has visited the space station 3 times. The first stage has also flown once before on our last CRS mission back in December. After stage separation, we'll be attempting a landing at Landing Zone 1 in Cape Canaveral so it can be reused on future missions. And if that landing is successful, it'll mark our 50th successful landing of a first stage. Now, there is a pretty good crowd behind me that are eagerly awaiting this 21st trip to the space station, and we're all really looking forward to a successful launch tonight. So back to you, Tammy.
Thanks, Shiva. We also want to commemorate the International Space Station's 20th year of operation. This November 2nd marks 20 years of continuous human presence on the orbiting laboratory. A fantastic achievement, and congrats to the program. Liftoff of today's rocket from Launch Complex 40 is timed right down to the very second. So the cargo spacecraft is lined up correctly to rendezvous with the ISS. For more details on launch trajectory, let's check in with NASA's Leah Cheshire, who is live at Johnson Space Center in Houston. Leah?
Thanks, Tammy, and welcome to the International Space Station Flight Control Room here in Houston, Texas. The Orbit 3 team is currently on console, and that's the last shift of today, but the Space Station Flight Control Room is monitored 24/7, 365 days a year. All of these people keeping tabs on what's going on aboard the International Space Station. Tonight, they are led by Flight Director Mike Lammers. He's gathering the information from all the flight controllers and overseeing the team throughout their tasks. We have 3 crew members on board the International Space Station right now. That's NASA astronauts Jessica Meir and Andrew Morgan, and in the center of your screen, Roscosmos cosmonaut Oleg Skripochka. They'll be eagerly anticipating the over 4,000 pounds of experiments, equipment, supplies, and maybe even more that are arriving to the International Space Station scheduled for this Monday, March 9th. However, they are still in the last hour or so of their sleep for the night as the space station operates in GMT, or Greenwich Mean Time. The astronauts will capture and berth the vehicle to the space station's Harmony module once it arrives on Monday morning, March 9th, and we'll be live for that at 4:30 a.m. Central Time to watch it all unfold. Until then, things are looking good here in the International Space Station Flight Control Room in Houston, and with that, we will send it back to you, Tammy.
Patrick O'Neill joins us live in studio. He is with the U.S. National Lab, an organization that acts as a conduit for science experiments to the ISS. Hey, Patrick.
Tammy, how you doing?
I'm good. You?
You're getting ready for a rocket launch, so I'm pretty excited.
I know, it's a great Friday night.
It is.
So tell us, what's the difference between the payloads that you handle and the payloads that NASA oversees?
Yeah, so the biggest difference, so when you think about NASA, you think about exploration, living and working in space, better understanding the human conditions so that we can go to places beyond low Earth orbit, whether that be the moon, Mars, etc. However, there's an opportunity for researchers to leverage this unique microgravity environment of the space station to ultimately benefit life on Earth, and that's where the U.S. National Lab comes into play. So the experiments that we sponsor all have this capacity to benefit life on Earth. That's the main difference.
That's awesome. So we know you're focused on this mission, but tell us some of the exciting things coming up on the horizon.
Well, I would say first and foremost, there's so much science that's going to be happening on station, whether that be from this launch where we have more than 20 payloads that are launching from a myriad of scientific disciplines, but then also down the road, it's just more science, more new facilities are going to be going to station, more commercial companies are going to be leveraging this microgravity environment. Institutions like the NIHs, the NSFs of the world, all of them wanting to take advantage of that unique space-based environment of the space station. So there's going to be an awful lot of activity on the station, whether that be right now from this launch, as well as things that are going to be happening down the road for the foreseeable future. And we're really excited about the promise and the potential of what the microgravity environment of the space station brings.
Sky's the limit, Patrick.
Well, maybe even beyond that.
Well, thank you. We are now just minutes from launch. Let's head back over to the Mission Director Center to get an update from Marie and Daryl.
Thank you, Tammy, and that's right. I'm here with Marie Lewis. I'm Daryl Nail, and the Falcon 9 rocket is nearly filled with fuel, the first stage that is, and then they'll begin second stage fueling. We are go for launch across all weather criteria, so that's a good sign. Now we're just watching and waiting for the count. We're sitting at 5 minutes and 22 seconds until liftoff.
Absolutely. And of course, the primary objective is to get that cargo Dragon into the correct orbit, and it accomplishes that on this two-stage Falcon 9 rocket. It stands 230 feet tall, 12 feet in diameter, and Falcon 9 has 9 Merlin engines that combined produce about 1.7 million pounds of thrust at liftoff. And then after that point, the second stage takes over and gets its own Merlin 1D vacuum engine producing another 210,000 pounds of thrust and the vacuum of space to push Dragon into its correct orbit. So that's the really cool part about how it gets Dragon up to space station. But there's some really cool stuff happening in the meantime back here closer to Earth.
Yeah, absolutely. Right now, you're looking at that shot. You can see the Dragon capsule at the top of the rocket. It actually has two International Space Station badges on it because it's been to space, as you've heard throughout the broadcast. It's been to the International Space Station twice, and this will be its third time. So it's got a couple markings up there on the capsule at the very top. And pretty soon we're going to see that strong back retract off from the rocket. So you want to look closely when we take that rocket shot again. Right now you're looking at SpaceX Mission Control Center in Hawthorne, California, where they are commanding the launch. But there's the shot from the ground, and you can see the gaseous oxygen mixing around down the bottom. That's because they're pre-chilling the engines before liftoff. So that's why you see that kind of smoky look at the bottom. It's really just gaseous oxygen. But a neat thing about this booster is it's coming back to land. And there you can see some of that gaseous oxygen at the top. And certainly the winds are a factor. We talked about that. We're go for winds, but it kind of shows you how the wind's coming across that rocket.
Yep, and it looked like we started to just see that strong back just tip back ever so slightly in preparation for launch because we're inside of 3.5 minutes now. But after liftoff, about 6 minutes after liftoff, we should see the beginning of the booster starting to return back to land. And it's going to be pretty interesting because they've never, this will be the highest winds they've ever landed that booster in if it goes well.
Right. They were clocking winds between 20 and 25 miles per hour at the landing site, LZ-1. And so that's still within limits for it to land, but it's going to be windy when it comes down, so it should be interesting to see what happens. We will certainly have cameras. SpaceX has cameras on the booster itself as well as the second stage, so we'll be able to see, and on the ground, we'll be able to see it come down, which is certainly an exciting time for that part of the mission. But again, we're T-minus 2 minutes and 33 seconds and counting until launch of the SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket and Dragon spacecraft. And as we mentioned, we're going to get a double sonic boom when that landing stage comes down. And it's actually going to ring in our Saturday because it's going to happen right around midnight.
Yeah.
So it should.
We got to celebrate the weekend somehow, right? I mean, we're
right.
working on Friday night. Let's start it with a bang.
Well, we got a rocket launch. That's pretty exciting. But as we get closer, of course, Marie, this will be your first launch countdown, which we're looking forward to.
It will.
You'll count us on into the liftoff, which is an exciting personal accomplishment, your first ever.
Yeah, and an honor to do it on the last flight of Dragon 1.
Absolutely. Going to retire Dragon 1. And no decision on what the future holds for that spacecraft, but they're moving on to Dragon 2. And it has a higher reusability rate, so that's something that SpaceX has often been very excited about, reusing their spacecraft and their rockets, and this will only help that. So T-minus 1 minute and 28 seconds and counting. Pretty soon what you're going to hear is the launch director give the go for launch. That'll happen around T-minus 45 seconds, so keep an ear for that. At this point, they've got the propellants almost fully loaded. They're going to pressurize those, and then they're going to let that command flight computer take over here in just a few seconds.
So we should hear that go for launch in just about 15 seconds.
Dragon is in startup.
Let's listen in as the launch director gives the go for launch.
LD, go for launch.
So there you heard it. All weather conditions are green.
T-minus 15 seconds.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. And liftoff of the Falcon 9 rocket and cargo Dragon on the final flight of the Dragon 1 spacecraft, taking research designed to improve life on Earth and lead discovery in space.
So the vehicle begins pitching downrange to get into its proper ascent for orbit. Falcon 9 is looking good. 2 million pounds of thrust as it goes into space. Coming up in just a few seconds, it will experience its maximum amount of force on the rocket. That'll happen at 1 minute and 18 seconds.
Falcon 9 is supersonic.
Going faster than the speed of sound.
And about to reach maximum aerodynamic pressure.
Vehicle is experiencing maximum dynamic pressure.
So you heard the call. Beautiful shot right there as it goes into space.
Now in less than a minute, we should hear confirmation of main engine cutoff. So far, looking great.
It's a beautiful launch. Now, there will be a rapid succession of events coming up in just a bit. As Marie noted, we'll have the first stage, main engine cutoff. It'll be followed by a separation, and then that second stage will start. And that'll all happen within a matter of 10 seconds or so. There's a great close-up shot of those Merlin D engines getting ready to shut off. And there they go.
Stage separation confirmed.
All right, the first stage is loose, and it is now falling back to Earth. And there you see the second stage. Engine has started.
Another 210,000 pounds of thrust, propelling Dragon into orbit.
There's a shot from the booster as it's falling away. So far, everything with regards to this flight is looking nominal, which means it's performing as expected. You see the split screen there on your right-hand side. You have the second stage engine. On the left-hand side, the booster. And just briefly, I believe we saw part of the nose cone coming out.
And again, the booster is headed back towards Cape Canaveral Air Force Station, where they are going to attempt to land this booster at landing zone 1 here. That first stage entry burn begins in about 3 minutes now for that booster. And here we're looking again at the second stage engine propelling Dragon towards orbit.
Vehicle is on a nominal trajectory.
Acquisition of signal in Bermuda.
So we were really watching closely, listening closely to the weather reports tonight, but so far, all things nominal.
Yeah, it had no problem with the winds down on the ground, lifted off right through there. No issues at all. The first stage conducted its burn, and now that first stage is falling back to Earth, and the second stage is carrying Dragon onwards to get into that orbit to meet up with the International Space Station. We are now 4 minutes and 45 seconds into flight. You see the split screen there. Everything is going well for Dragon and the booster so far. Coming up in just about a minute, we'll get the first stage entry burn will begin. This burn will allow it to slow down the booster and get it into position so that it can land.
And I think we heard Shiva say earlier, if they do this landing successfully, it will be the 50th landing of a SpaceX booster, that's a big number.
They've gotten really consistent at being able to land these boosters. But it'll be interesting because we know we've got 20 to 25 mile per hour winds. Elon Musk, CEO of SpaceX, tweeting it'll be the greatest winds that this booster has faced. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. This, as you look at the second stage burning there, Dragon is expected to rendezvous with the International Space Station right around Monday evening.
And this will be the 19th time they've landed a booster back on land. The rest of those landings have been on their drone ship, one of their 2 drone ships out at sea. So again, really hoping they're able to do that even with the winds going on. And we should have that first stage entry burn beginning any moment now.
And for those who are gathered locally, make sure you keep an ear out for the double sonic boom when the booster comes back and breaks the speed of sound. There you can see that burn, that entry burn has begun. On the left-hand side of your screen, you can see the grid fins are out for the first stage booster, and down it comes.
Stage 1 entry burn shut down.
And so they shut down that entry burn. Everything looking great so far. Of course, the burn helped illuminate the picture. You can't see much when it's not burning, but
right.
But it's a good sign that it completed its first burn.
Stage 1 FTS is safe.
All right, that's going to wrap up our coverage for this portion of the mission. Thanks for joining us. We're now going to toss it over to Shiva at SpaceX headquarters in Hawthorne, California. Shiva?
Yeah, thanks, guys. So coming up in just about 15 seconds, we have our landing burn. Falcon 9 takes a series of 3 burns to do that landing. First is the boost back burn that everyone has watched, and the entry burn to reduce the aerodynamic loads on the vehicle. Now is coming up on the entry burn. It looks like we have good ignition. This only lights up the center Merlin engine, and shortly after, the 4 landing legs will deploy. You can see on your screen that left-hand side, the grid fins. There's a beautiful shot of Falcon 9 as it's coming back towards landing zone 1. Keep an eye out here for landing leg deploy. I'm hearing a lot of cheers behind me. It sounds like we may have touched down. Beautiful, and that is confirmation. That is the 50th successful landing of a Falcon 9 first stage. Congratulations to the entire SpaceX team. Now, real quick here, and you can see this on your right-hand side, the second stage is going to have shutdown of its MVAC engine. So there's the call out. You can see SECO there. Expecting a call out on the net shortly. And shortly after, the guidance team will let us know if the second stage, and there's that call out for the nominal orbit insertion. So that means that we're ready for the next step, which is deployment of Dragon from the top of the second stage. Now, once Dragon deploys from the second stage, we'll actually get there's that camera view actually, looking up into Dragon's trunk. Dragon carries 2 types of cargo, pressurized and unpressurized cargo. Unpressurized cargo in the trunk portion and pressurized within the capsule. So shortly here, we should have Dragon deploy. We'll hear that on the launch nets.
Acquisition of signal Newfoundland.
And Dragon's carrying about...
Separation confirmed.
There is Dragon gently floating away. People behind me are ecstatic to see this final Dragon 1 spacecraft heading off to the International Space Station. On the sides of Dragon, you can actually see the fairings that protect the solar arrays. Those solar arrays produce more than 5 kilowatts of power that help recharge Dragon as it makes its way towards the International Space Station. We're expecting the solar arrays to deploy around T+12 minutes. And why don't we check in with Leah at Johnson Space Center for coverage of the solar array deploy. Leah?
Thanks, Shiva. A great launch, and of course, really exciting always to see that first stage landing. Congrats on the 50th one of those. We are seeing live views and got confirmation of the second stage separation. And if you looked inside Dragon's trunk, which you can kind of see now floating toward its destination of the space station, you might have gotten a glimpse of the Bartolomeo platform as an unpressurized payload. That's a payload by the European Space Agency, which will serve as an experiment platform, and it will sit at a unique spot on the station where it has an unobstructed view of the Earth and into space. And as you mentioned, the next milestone for Dragon is the solar array deploy to occur at 12 minutes after launch, providing power to the spacecraft over its journey for the next 2 days. Believe it or not, the wingspan of Dragon, once those solar arrays unfurl, is about 54 feet. But this is actually the last time we'll see a solar array deploy on Dragon, because the new CRS-2 vehicle is switching to a little bit of a different style. The same as the Crew Dragon vehicle, where the solar panels are instead wrapped around the outside of the trunk. Upon its arrival to the space station, SpaceX Dragon will be the fourth vehicle parked, joining a Soyuz spacecraft, one Russian Progress resupply craft, and Northrop Grumman's Cygnus 13 spacecraft. We expect to see those solar arrays deploy shortly, and we are going to stand by waiting for that call.
Dragon's propulsion system has successfully primed and all thrusters report ready for firing.
And there you can see those solar arrays beginning to deploy. Things are looking good for Dragon. We'll stand by for audio confirmation.
Dragon's solar arrays have successfully deployed and are ready for activation.
And there we have it. With the successful deployment of the solar arrays, Dragon will begin gathering energy from the sun on its two-day journey to the International Space Station. Once it reaches the space station on March 9th, astronaut Jessica Meir will enter the cupola of the International Space Station, that window area where she'll have a great view to reach out and capture the spacecraft with the Canadarm2. She'll then turn the controls over to the ground, who will then reposition the spacecraft and install it to the station's Harmony module, where it will stay until April. But before then, we are going to take a moment and talk with Kenny Todd, Operations and Integration Manager for the International Space Station. Thanks so much for joining us, Kenny.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So we mentioned this is the end of the CRS-1 contract. What can we look forward to with CRS-2?
Well, with CRS-2, we learned a lot with this first 20 flights with SpaceX, and so we were able to step back when we went to the CRS-2 contract, take a look at those things, how to flow in some additional flexibility. So one of the things we'll have with CRS-2, we'll have a little bit more powered payload locker capability, and that'll help us with being able to put on more payloads. A lot of the science, the high value science we fly, is associated with some of our biological samples, and our ability to fly more of those allows us to support more users here on the ground with a lot of investigations in the biomedical area. So we're excited about that. Again, that's more science we can get to orbit to support those communities, and more science we can return to. In addition to that, one thing you'll notice if you've watched SpaceX Dragon launches and captures in the past is we won't be capturing anymore. They'll be docking, and again, that's an important capability as this same Dragon 2 spacecraft, the crewed version of that, also docks to the space station. So again, that's a significant change in the way we'll do our integrated operations between station and the Dragon. And finally, if you're familiar with the Dragon landings in the past, they've happened in the Pacific Ocean, and as a result of that, sometimes it takes 1, maybe 2 days for the boat to retrieve the Dragon and actually get it back to port and get some of our samples in the hands of these investigators. So with the Dragon 2 spacecraft, they're actually going to land in the Atlantic. So when they do that, they'll be a matter of hours from the port, and so that'll allow us to get this critical science back in the investigators' hands much quicker. So that's all pluses, and we're excited about moving them forward into the CRS-2 contract.
Absolutely, definitely all things to be excited about moving forward and making things even better. So commercial resupply missions aren't the only thing we're working on with SpaceX. We are also preparing to launch crews from American soil for the first time on American rockets since 2011. Can you talk a little bit about how these commercial resupply missions have paved the way for those crewed missions?
Sure. SpaceX, when we set up the CRS-1 contract with them, the first thing they had to learn to do was how to build a spacecraft and how to certify it and how to get it into low Earth orbit and get it back on the ground again. And so the very first contract was huge in helping them to establish that confidence that they could get their spacecraft, get it turned back around, and get it on orbit and get it back home again. And so getting in that cadence is very important. Additionally, just learning how to operate, being an operations team, just like here in Mission Control in Houston, they had to stand up their own operations team, and so that's a very important capability that they're able to carry over as they step up to the crewed missions. So the ability just to know that they can do this job, they have the experience that they built on with all these cargo missions, and so while it's a totally different vehicle, there are a lot of similarities. There are a lot of the same components that are carrying over into that spacecraft, and they can do some with some level of confidence that they're going to be ready to go.
And once Dragon arrives Monday morning, there will be 3 crew members on the International Space Station. Can you tell us a little bit about what station operations are going to look like with a new vehicle, all of the science and experiments and supplies to unload, and our 3 crew members?
Sure. It'll be a bit of a sprint for the next 4 weeks or so. I tell all the crews before they launch that especially the new folks who have been there before, when you get a Dragon on board, it is about a 4-week sprint from beginning to end. But with 3 crew, it's even a little bit more of a situation where they're having to manage themselves. We're having to help manage the schedules for them and make sure that we don't, tire them out too much, and so that they're ready to do all of the things necessary for that particular mission. But anyway, this particular mission, towards the end of it, we'll also start to flow in some of our return activities for Jessica and Drew. So about the first week of April or so, things are going to get really dynamic as we look to wrap up this particular mission, plus get ready for Jessica and Drew to come home. The new Soyuz with Chris Cassidy will be arriving in that same time frame, so it'll be a busy place at station, and so we're looking forward to it. But at the same time, we're going to have to keep our eye on the ball and make sure the crews stay rested and able to get the work done that they need to get done.
And they always seem to. So the Bartolomeo facility also launched on this Dragon spacecraft. What does that mean for future station research opportunities?
Oh, it's fantastic. We only have so many sites external to the station that we can put science and research on, and it's a competitive resource. And so our European colleagues, they're stepping out into the commercial market with this launch of this platform, and so we're excited about it from an overall station partnership perspective because it brings capability to the station. But we're also excited for our European colleagues because again, they're interested in continuing this growth into this commercial low Earth orbit economy that we're all trying to grow as a spacefaring nations, part of the International Space Station. So this we think is going to be a great thing for everybody out there who is interested in getting access to low Earth orbit, especially on the external platform that's on station, and this just adds to that capability. So it's again all around good for the partnership, and it's certainly good for our ESA colleagues.
An all-around good launch and great views we had tonight. Thank you so much for joining us, Kenny.
Yeah, it's my pleasure.
We are now expecting Dragon to arrive to the International Space Station Monday morning, very early, and you can join us live at 4:30 a.m. Central Time for the arrival of Dragon. As Kenny mentioned, it will be the last time that Dragon needs to be grappled and berthed to the International Space Station. In the future, it will dock. So join us for that last bit of mission coverage for Dragon. With all of that, we will toss it back to Tammy at Kennedy Space Center. Everything looking good here in Mission Control, Houston.
Thanks, Leah. Shiva, out in California, you guys look pretty excited. Can you tell us a little bit about how the launch went tonight? We heard a lot of screaming.
Yeah, actually, there's probably still a good 50 people out here. Maybe there were about 100 or 200 earlier. And, we had a beautiful on-time launch tonight at about 11:50 Eastern that just lit up the Florida East Coast. It launched from Space Launch Complex 40 this evening. And, this was our 21st launch to the International Space Station and our 9th launch ever with a flight-proven Dragon. So this was also our final CRS mission using the first version of Dragon. And beginning with CRS-21, we are going to be flying an upgraded version of the spacecraft that will be capable of flying people aboard. I can confirm now that Dragon is in a good orbit. The solar array is deployed on time. The guidance bay door should be opening shortly, and we're making our way towards the space station. We're planning to arrive at the station on March 9th at about 7 a.m. Eastern Time. The astronauts aboard will then capture Dragon in a process called berthing using the station's robotic arm. And then once Dragon is safely docked to the International Space Station, they'll unload the about 4,500 pounds of cargo and crew supplies and scientific payloads that are aboard the spacecraft. Dragon's going to spend about 4 weeks at the space station before it comes back to Earth. And, all in all, a successful day for Dragon. Awesome day for Falcon 2. This was our 50th recovery of a first stage. So really just a fantastic mission for the entire SpaceX team. Really want to thank our friends at NASA and at the Air Force and the Federal Aviation Administration, and of course all of our customers for the support and hard work they put into tonight's launch. And a big congratulations to both the SpaceX and NASA teams that developed and supported the first version of Dragon. All of that hard work has really paved the way for the upcoming first crew flight with NASA astronauts aboard later on this year. So with that, back to you, Tammy.
Thanks, Shiva, and congratulations. And that's going to wrap up our coverage. For more information, visit nasa.gov/station or nasa.gov/SpaceX. I'm Tammy Long, and from everyone here at NASA's Kennedy Space Center, thank you for being part of the successful launch of CRS-20. We leave you with another stunning look at tonight's launch. Have a great weekend, everyone, and go CRS-20 and go International Space Station. Good night.
8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. And liftoff of the Falcon 9 rocket and cargo Dragon on the final flight of the Dragon 1 spacecraft, taking research designed to improve life on Earth and lead discovery in space.
So the vehicle begins pitching downrange to get into its proper ascent for orbit. Falcon 9 is looking good. 2 million pounds of thrust as it goes into space. Coming up in just a few seconds, it will experience